Okay, I think I'd like to invite everyone to be seated. We're going to start to final session before we go for closing session. So thanks for all 2.5 days hard working, and now we come to some results and the recommendation. And our FTA team based in headquarters, Rome, and also different place, and they did a great job. And also our China team did a very good job. So without further delay, and I'd like to hand over to Vincent to facilitate our sharing our results. Yeah. So Vincent, and I'd like to hand over to you to facilitate the final session of results and the recommendation. Vincent, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody in Kunming. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone online, and thanks. So this is the last day of our conference, and of course, as we said in the beginning, this conference was to share between ourselves findings, but also questions going forward, discuss new ideas, strengthen collaborations, develop new collaborations, but also importantly, and especially because it's been held in Kunming and at KIB and online, look at identifying main findings, recommendations that should be brought to the attention of decision makers on the road to CBD 15 and its implementation, as well as the other Rio Convention, climate, UNCCD, and also the UN Food System Summit. So this is why in this session, the first part of this plenary, we will have the coordinator of the 6 technical themes that will present the result of their session. There were more than 100 in total, either oral or poster presentations. And what's coming out of that is going to be presented to you. There is going to be a Slido voting from the public in the room, but also online with the same system that is called Slido, after each presentation, so that you will be able to express which one from the recommendations and findings are for you the most important or significant. And we'll have a minute after each presentation. So we will go by the theme leader, the theme co-leaders one by one. And as the spirit of this conference, it was half from China and half from international participants. So I guess we'll get to there as well. When this is done, I will present with Jiangshu the draft proposed outcomes of the conference that result from, in fact, these 6 series of presentation. And I will explain to you what we will do with this. And then we'll have a coffee break, and we'll finish with the closing segment with 3 exciting keynotes. If that's okay with you, then unless there are any questions, I would suppose that without further ado, we can start with the main results and recommendation by theme leaders. The first one to start is theme number 1, which was on trees for agroecology and circular agriculture. And I think it's Fergus Sinclair who is going to present for this theme.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent. And maybe I could have the first slide, which is the title slide. And I'd just like to say that because Dossa has done all the hard work, he asked me to do the presentation. So it's been very nice working with Dossa on what's been a really fascinating session. Next slide, please. And I was absolutely astounded by the breadth and depth of the material that's being presented, both in the oral presentations and also in posters. 9 presentations from 8 countries covering 3 continents, and looking at a range of things from agroforestry, biodiversity conservation, animal husbandry and nutrition, the making of silk, soil remediation, and the degradation of plastic wastes by fungi. And there's something really interesting about the use of fungi. Serendipity seems to come in a lot of the time. You all be familiar with Alexander Fleming, Scott's virologist who actually discovered penicillin by accidentally allowing mold to grow on one of his Staphylococcus plates. But I also found out that there was a woman in Spain, Federica Bertoncini, who collected some wax moths that she found, the caterpillars of the wax moth, that had been eating through her beehives. And she put them in a plastic bag. They ate through the plastic bag and escaped. And from there, they isolated in the gut of the caterpillar Aspergillus flavus. And we had a paper on that in the poster, looking at the genetic coding for esterase enzymes that break down polyurethane. So very exciting, this new use of fungi to look at recycling of plastics and their degradation. Next slide, please. So the three key areas of results are firstly around agroforestry being a very developed form of agroecology, because trees are so functionally different from the annual crops and livestock that they're interacting with, that you have a huge scope to manage interactions amongst the components. And that's where a lot of the circularity in agriculture comes from, is in those multiple interactions that are going on. And the critical issue is obviously managing those to get synergistic outcomes, higher productivity, greater recycling. But we've got key knowledge and implementation gaps that are constraining the widespread uptake of agroforestry, and these need to be addressed. The second key finding relates, and again across the various presentations and posters, is that the trees in agricultural systems represent an investment in ecological infrastructure. Trees are larger structures, they have deeper root systems than annual crops, and you can get very high value products as a result of the amount of energy that can be fixed from the sun, and diversify production, increasing resilience of agricultural systems. And we saw examples with moringa, magnolia, phyllanthus, rattan, rubber, and coffee. And of course, the first three of those are really important in providing fodder and therefore contributing to the animal husbandry side of integrated systems. And of course, the animals are then critical in this circularity of agriculture involved in recycling. And I've talked about the coding of Aspergillus in the as a fungi that breaks down plastics. And of course, we know Aspergillus because it's a pathogen. It causes a lot of problems, including producing aflatoxins post-harvest in agricultural crops. Next slide. So circularity was really critical, and this is actually from one of the posters, which looks at the roles of the cultivation of mushrooms, field cultivation of mushrooms in soil nutrient cycling. And you can see just how many multiple circles there are there in terms of transfers and interactions that fungi are involved in terms of recycling materials and contributing to circularity in agriculture. So that leaves us with three key recommendations. The first is an urgent need to reform maladaptive policies that constrain and develop conducive policies that encourage the uptake of agroforestry, including integration across sectors and scales. The second is an urgent need to link global information about agroforestry species and their distribution under predicted climate change, with the local knowledge that farmers have about how to fit trees into their farms, their fields, and various landscape niches, which may be done by planting or through natural regeneration, managed natural regeneration. And finally, we see an urgent need to develop the use of fungi for the treatment of plastic waste and for soil reclamation and remediation. There are many, many species, and only a few of them have so far been looked at. So there's a real opportunity to look at that biodiversity of fungi and to deploy innovations widely to create more circular agricultural and food systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Fergus, and thanks for keeping the time. Very sharp, very clear. Now, time to get the feedback from the audience. So, Fabio, can we run the Slido poll?
Yes, I will ask my friend Vito to put on the screen the modalities to reach the polling. So this is for everybody who has joined us both online and also on site in China. If you could take a minute to join this website called slido.com, you see the instructions online, and then type FTA Kunming. You don't need the hashtag, but it's the same if you type it. This will bring you to a room where there is currently a poll. So make sure you do that. I'm going to run the poll in a second. Okay, I hope everybody has joined. So I'm going to launch the first question.
Okay. So we can see the question on the Zoom screen, but we can also have the Slido app here on your mobile or on your computer.
Yes,
Slido, in fact, web page.
Exactly. You cannot vote from Zoom. You have to connect to Slido differently. So
let's leave a little bit of time. I see 004. It means that this is the number of people having replied. So 3 options. Please refer to what Fergus has said. This is just a shorthand for it. The importance of maladapted policies or enabling policies, the issue of global information about species in relation to climate change, and the use of fungi for treatment of plastic waste as part of circular economy. So
now we're gonna, in a minute or even less, we're going to take off this share screen, but the question will still be there while we do the second presentation. So people will have time to think about it. So I think we can stop sharing in a few seconds and go to the second presentation.
Okay, Fabio. So this was a little bit of a training. Keep being connected on Slido. Don't close the Slido because you'll need it for the other themes to vote on each of them, and we'll come back to the full results at the end.
Thank you. Yes, Vito, you can stop sharing and we can we can move to the second presentation. Thank you.
Okay, and the second presentation is about the second theme on tree diversity, realizing economic and ecological value from tree genetic resources to bridge production gaps and promote resilience. This has been co-chaired by Ramni Jamnadas and Chris Kettle from FTA and Professor Bu Dengpan from our Chinese colleagues' side. I think it's Ramni, it's you presenting. So you have 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. First slide, please. Hello, everyone. As Vincent has mentioned, this session addressed tree diversity and very well supported by Chris Kettle, Bu Dengpan, and with my support here. Next slide, please. Yeah, very wordy. But just to tell you that we had representation from 5 continents, very, very diverse presentations, ranging from upstream presentations, geospatial mapping, and all the way down to propagation protocols, linking up with policy, genomics, indigenous knowledge, looking at the posters and stuff. So very, very diverse. Why this session was necessary, I think, just to recap, we know that tree diversity, whether it's fruits, nuts, vegetables, timbers, medicinals, fodder gums, they are threatened. Almost 12% of the species of the world are today overexploited and almost on the red list, with 40% of species generally under the threat umbrella. So, and with this rising enthusiasm for tree planting for restoration, no wonder everyone is just running around making these holes, sticking the trees in. No, there's a big problem that's facing the world because of this mad rush to plant trees. Diversity is being ignored, quality is being ignored, policies are not addressing these issues. So this theme really highlighted the challenge and the opportunities that FTA research on tree diversity brought forward, and the opportunities and the objectives that the community and the countries need to look at. Yeah, the key results, there was a lot of knowledge being shared, all kinds of knowledge, decision protocols, support tools, technologies, methodologies, and I couldn't pinpoint on one because there was every presentation was different. Biophysical, ecological, socioeconomic, indigenous knowledge are being used to assess biological characteristics, the value of these species, the use of these species, the threat to the tree diversity, and recommendations being made and where the future focus should be. And the key result was, of course, all of them talked about the threat to tree diversity due to anthropogenic and activities, and the tools and recommendations, different kinds of tools and recommendations that are there and that need to be developed still to actually address this problem. And one of the highlights that came out, and which we all know, and it's becoming very apparent to the world, is the non-availability of quality planting material. There's a lack of knowledge on what is quality. You know, quality is not only a nice looking seedling, it's the genetics, it's the matching to the site, the right species for the right place. It's not only the different species, but also within species, the variation within the species, the traits, the health, the lack of availability of seed, the lack of characterization of seed sources, whether they are natural seed sources or are they being actually developed. All this was highlighted in the abstracts and the posters collectively. And so a lot of recommendations emerged from these diversity of presentations and abstracts, that there needs to be a serious investment in knowledge to fill the knowledge gaps. There are 60,000 species, of which about 40% are being used by communities, and these are the ones we know are being used by communities, but there's a lack of knowledge starting from basic propagation protocols. How are we going to conserve these species, or how are we going to put them in wider cultivation if we don't even know how to propagate them? And there's also opportunities for upstream research, whether it's genomics or geospatial approaches, digital computing. There's also a need to capture local knowledge. Proof of concepts, proof of applications are required, along with value proposition, return on investment. Then the second one was a serious need for investment in capacity. While there is a lot of international and national collaborations going on, more of this needs to be done. The governments and donors and private sector need to invest in career development in tree-based interventions. Knowledge sharing platforms, digital and otherwise, need to be invested in. Thirdly, investing in production and quality and use of quality seedlings and having sustainable seed delivery systems. whether it is in seed sources or in breeding, there is just not enough investment. And we know that it is because of the long life cycle of trees. This needs long-term investments. We're not dealing with annuals, we're dealing with perennials, which to maturity sometimes take 15 to 20 years for some species. The next one was take conservation of tree species more seriously. Like I mentioned, 12,000 tree species are considered threatened, and 10% of them are threatened with extinction. Conservation of trees is high priority, whether it's ex situ in gene banks or whether it's in situ within the forest or on farms, circa situ. There's a serious need for it, and there isn't just enough investment there and not enough attention being paid to that. Having enabling forest policy, actually there were a couple of presentations which alluded to the needing for enabling policies, and also having certified nurseries and having standards for quality seed material, like in the agriculture sector. Currently, no regulations are there for seed for forestry, and hence it shows the need, how much investment and attention is needed by the governments for forestry, for tree seeds, and of course investment in tree value chains. I mean, if we want to have the economic advantage from trees, unless private sector or the government invests in developing these value chains all the way from germplasm all the way to market linkages, it ain't going to happen. So rather than being a goal in itself, tree diversity is actually a mean to achieve many goals. So long-term investment is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramni. Very rich. So let's, without further ado, because we're a bit short of time already, let's move directly to the polling and see if we have improved our skills on Slido. So you've seen 3 main recommendations. Which one, from your perspective, is the most important? You have 45 seconds.
I think there were a bit more than 3.
6. Yeah, there are 6 choices. Investment in knowledge, investment in capacity. These are shortcuts. Production and use of quality seedlings and seed delivery systems. Conservation of tree species, policy frameworks, also mentioned by Ferguson colleagues, and investment in tree value chains.
Okay, since I'm taking just the floor a second to say, Vincent, that people have kept on voting during the presentation of Ramni, which was really perfect. So we can keep.
We can move on. Really, we can move on. Let's move on then, and keep connected on Slido. But please follow the room, because we're now talking about trees in the framework of the CBD. And here, I think over to Kunmin, Professor Zumi, I think it's you.
Thank you. The session STEMI 3 is, has the topic of trees in the framework of the CBD, and it has accumulated 6 speakers from different countries. So from the topic of the speakers, we see that there are a lot of relationship between the biodiversity and the climate change. And the speakers are trying to find out some evidence to show the effects of agroforestry and also the bioclimate issues. And in the end, we see that there are some systematic commemoration between the primary forestry and the replantation forestries and some species, especially to do with fields in some farming areas. Yes, from the speaker's discussion, we can find that we have 3 key results. The first one is that we should not only try to focus on the scientific proof itself. We should try to consider about the international trade agreements, which have important and continuous effects on the diversification through both behavior leading and obligation rules on the related stakeholders, which means that if we considering about the biodiversity, maybe it has a lot of relations from the international trade agreements, not only within the related parties, but also from other parties. And the second result is that there are some special part of forest we should try to consider, including the high conservation value forest, remnant patches of natural forest, and integrated landscape management, which are crucial to realize the goal of sustainable development and the environmental sector by increasing landscape resilience. And if we want to improve the efficiency of biodiversity, maybe we should try to focus on these areas because it has much better effect compared with other part of forest if we have only limited resources. And second is that agroforestry, reforestation, and related ecosystem services are allies, not adversaries of biodiversity in native forest restoration. So after the speakers have given their speeches, we have a lot of discussion between the speakers and audience, and they have some question about the different ideas of the benefit and the losses to do with the forest, and also some kind of relationship between the biodiversity and climate change. And through these results, we have mainly 3 recommendations. The first one is that trade and investment agreements should be carefully designed to protect biodiversity while taking consideration of different status of resources and social characteristics. It is important to carry on more research on financing mechanisms for biodiversity with the support of binding rules from agreements. And the second recommendation is that landscape management integrating agriculture, forestry, and conservation for the benefit of biodiversity and ecosystem services should remain priorities. International cooperation on the financing mechanisms to support science research on biodiversity are a strong pillar for better understanding and action. And the last recommendation is the agroforestry, reforestation, ecological corridors, and related ecosystem services need more coordination on the standards, norms, and good practices. It is necessary to balance the use of forestry, agroforestry, and agricultural resource in harmonious way to preserve biodiversity or even improve it in degraded landscapes. So these are what we have for the Semi 3. Thanks.
Thank you warmly, Professor Zumi, and thanks for, it was a challenging theme, a very rich one, and thanks for pointing to different components from trade, how products are sold and bought, the regulations, landscape management concerns in natural and managed ecosystems in particular, and the enabling environment. To that, some pollings available on Slido for this rich set. There are 5 choices here. So again, I won't read them because it was a very clear presentation. Look at your smartphone or at your computer and pick one of those. And I propose that we go right to theme number 4, which was about mountain ecosystems and food security. And here it was co-coordinated by our colleague Himlal Baral from CIFOR ICRAF and Hua Fengyuan. So I think, Professor Fengyuan, I think it's your turn to present the outcomes.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm here to represent the moderators of session theme 4 to report on the key results and recommendations of theme number 4, mountain ecosystems and food security. So why is this theme an important one to address? Here we have listed some key reasons, but by and large, mountain systems are an important part of the Earth's land systems. They cover about 20% of the land surface of the Earth. They are home to about 12% of the world's population. And at the same time, mountain systems tend to be hotspots of biodiversity. But at the same time, there are challenges associated with mountain systems. Most obviously, we tend to have difficult terrain features and associated climate conditions. And because of this, access to mountain systems tends to be more challenging than otherwise. And mountain systems are also tend to be prone to natural disasters. Now, because of these reasons, when we think about the socio-ecological systems, mountain systems may pose some unique challenges for food security for human beings. We have a figure here saying that about 245 million people living in the mountains areas are estimated to be vulnerable to food insecurity. What's also not, what's maybe not written on the slide here is another issue, which is to do with biodiversity conservation and ecosystem service delivery. Because of a series of factors linked to land use change and human occupation of the mountain land surface, environmental metrics such as biodiversity and ecosystem services tend to be threatened as well. So under this theme or under this context, this session has convened a really rich array of talks and posters. We had 5 talks coming from different countries and 3 posters covering a range of topics from soil and plant ecology to cropping systems and food security and land use. Interestingly, in terms of disciplinary specialty, our session also covers a diverse field ranging from ecology to anthropology and land use science. So from the talks of the session and the posters, we have compiled a list of key results. I apologize for the kind of wordy layout of the slide, but by and large, because the talks in this session also cover a fairly wide range of topics, our results may be somewhat kind of separate, but I think taken together, we can try to distill some common messages, which I'm going to cover in the next slide. So the first key result has to do with food production in the mountain systems. So we have a really interesting talk coming from or covering northwestern Vietnam, showing that because of government policies in recent years, there's been a drastic shift from grain production to fruit tree production, as well as cash crop production. And because of this, even though there's been some positive socioeconomic benefits to the local farmers, there remain some significant challenges to do with land use management, to do with pesticide use and so forth, so on. So in terms of socioeconomic and environmental benefits, to ensure the delivery of socioeconomic and environmental benefits, there is some continued challenge during this land use shift on a fairly large scale. And coming from another set of talks, we have some coverage of local indigenous crop varieties used traditionally in the Eastern Himalayas. So a finding is that a variety of indigenous and captive crops are currently cultivated under the traditional farming system in the Eastern Himalayas. And because of their long-term use and their unique nutritional qualities, they can contribute to the nutritional security and food security of the region. We also have a really interesting and great talk covering the potential use of biocontrol agents for the crop system in the mountain areas. Specifically, this talk found that the use of endophytic fungi can be used as a biocontrol agent and at the same time biofertilizer to help suppress pathogens so that we don't have to use too much pesticides. So this in turn would enhance the agricultural productivity of the cropping system and contribute to the sustainability of the cropping system in the mountain ecosystems. So moving on to recommendations, we have distilled the following 3 recommendations. The first one is we should aim to restore, rehabilitate, and conserve the agrobiological sorry, this is like blocked, but agroecology and locally adaptive practices such as mixed farming and community forestry to provide diverse sources of food for the local population. We should also focus on integrated farming systems, wild relatives of crops and livestock, wild edibles, multi-purpose trees on farms, and importantly, value chain development, including increased coordination among the different services and sectors, and involving local communities in participatory land use planning as well. And finally, we should, in light of the need for sustainable crop production, we should aim to promote reduced tillage, organic farming, and use of biocontrol agents for controlling pathogens. So these are the reports that we have compiled from our theme. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And a round of applause is also from online. A real applause is not virtual for this very important theme that really enriched the conference and is especially relevant to the context in Kunming and in the world, in key regions of the world. Can we have the Slido, Fabio? And then, so here, three choices for theme number 4. Please look at them and look at them also online. Don't be shy and pick up one. Yeah, let's go. Let's move on then.
Because it's
let's move on
really
because
well.
we are a bit 4 minutes behind on schedule. And theme number 5 was about assessing benefits of landscape restoration. And here it was also co-led by colleagues Peter Minan from ICRAF, Chris Kettle from Biodiversity, and Guo Yufu. I think it's Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Morning, everybody. So this is theme 5, assessing the benefits of landscape restoration. It was, as Vincent said, co-chaired by Peter Manang, myself, Yufu, who was also online with us, and we had extra support from Yufang in the room physically in Kunming, which was great. We, as you all can appreciate, we're at the beginning of the decade on ecosystem restoration, and this is a hugely important topic. The theme covered 6 speakers from across the globe, from all continents, and we had some 50 participants online. And I think, for me, the real overarching theme of the presentation was the urgency in really being able to assess the benefits in the face of the extreme situation we are faced with climate change, and particularly with the IPC modeling projections to global warming and the accelerated rates of warming and the potential for restoration to deliver on mitigating climate change, but also adapting to climate change. And coupled with that, the huge potential we have from using biodiversity-based solutions, and particularly neglected and underutilized species, to help us to increase the benefit delivery from different aspects of ecosystem restoration. We had 6 presentations were really, I think, covered some really important points, moving from the urgent need in using more pilot sites for evaluating benefits through more sophisticated ways of actually analyzing and understanding the cost-benefit ratios of different interventions through ecosystem restoration, which was presented by the TER approach. But then also having a much better understanding of the profitability of more diversified restoration interventions, such as diversified agroforestry systems. And we had a really fantastic presentation showing that by using more underutilized or neglected and underutilized fruit tree species, we can really enhance the profitability of agroforestry systems through better use of those species. We also had some nice presentation talking about the importance of linking not only the carbon benefits, but relating that to the water cost and benefits of different restoration interventions. And the last 2 presentations really highlighted that some tree species can be extraordinarily powerful in providing additional benefits, particularly those leguminous tree species and shrubs, and particularly those in association with better understanding of microbial interactions. So we had very rich presentations and discussions around how those nature-based solutions can really help us to increase the diversity of benefits. So the key results that came out from the session really were that using a mix of native and naturalized tree species in forest landscape restoration can maintain regional carbon stocks and increase other related ecosystem services, including the prevention of invasive species. But native trees really are often neglected, and these underutilized tree species can have a huge potential to greatly increase economic benefits, particularly for smallholder farmers. The second point was that there are a growing number of evidences that show that growth promoting bacteria in the soil can have these huge benefits to the growth of leguminous species, and help improve the environment for plant growth, which of course can enhance both the carbon and production benefits of the different species used in ecosystem restoration. And finally, and I think an important point that generated quite some debate was the huge potential of establishment of leguminous shrubs on farmlands can contribute to multiple benefits, especially carbon storage, climate mitigation with adaptation, but also biodiversity conservation benefits and poverty reduction and food security. But this shouldn't be at the cost of neglecting underutilized and underexplored native tree species that we currently don't know the full benefits of. So just to wrap up, what were our key recommendations? The first of which was local communities must be involved in the design and implementation of landscape restoration projects in order to ensure the efficiency of these projects to meet all of their benefits and to be resilient. Second, the economic benefits of ecosystem restoration projects should be analysed in depth in order to attract resources from different stakeholders, particularly private sector funding, but also including government funding, donor funding, and private funding from different sources. And so having a very clear understanding of both the costs of implementation and the broader ecosystem, social and environmental benefits are critical to that discourse. And finally, absolutely essential, which is no surprise to anyone, a landscape approach should be adopted in ecological restoration in order to meet not only environmental needs, but also social and economic needs of both local and national and global communities. So I think I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to your colleagues and all the presenters in this theme. So here again, we're at the start of an agenda and a lot to contribute. What are elements of key importance? Here, 3 options deriving from the presentation and discussions in theme 5 for you to pick what is for you important. I think you are now quite all, we're now quite all used to Slido, but we'll do it one more time after theme number 6, which is trees for a circular green economy. And that was yesterday a fantastic session. So I think Peter Mortimer, it's you to present on behalf of colleagues.
Great. So our theme was there's a bit of overlap with theme 1, but I think the two themes were independent enough just to complement each other. So we were looking at the use of trees for a circular green economy. It was a pretty interesting theme with a range of topics, but you could group them into 2 broader categories. The first being the use of trees and tree-based products for projects, and the other being the use of forest resources such as NTFPs for those projects. And I think you can differentiate between the 2, and they have different implications on forest and tree use. I really enjoyed learning about the wide and diverse range of ways that people and projects are utilizing forest resources. I personally broadened my own sort of knowledge base on the options available to us. And I really want to give a big thanks to all of those who contributed to making the session so successful. Michael's provided us with a nice summary of the theme. In total, we had 16 abstracts coming from 8 different countries. As I said, it was a wide range of topics, including mushrooms, the use of rattan and bamboo, biomass energy, feed utilization, natural capital, barks, bark substrates, and a couple more on fungi and urban green spaces. If I look at the key results coming out of all of those talks and posters, we had 5 main results. The first of which is non-timber forest products, such as mushrooms, bamboo, wood and charcoal production, as well as rattan products, can all be used to generate income and contribute towards rural development programs. Like I said, it really gives us a diverse range of tools in that toolbox we can use when we're implementing projects on the use of forest resources. We've seen that forests can be used as a natural capital in context of reduced carbon emissions, which can also provide revenues that can be shared amongst the stakeholders. We saw that woody plants have the potential for use as animal feed, adding to the diversity of products coming out of forest systems. We also saw biomass energy as an important use of wood and bamboo from both natural regeneration and planted forest systems. And lastly, the use of woody residues for mushroom cultivation, charcoal production increases the resource efficiency and provides value addition to local rural livelihoods. Basically, it's a way of increasing the use of products coming out of those projects. So we diversify the range of outputs and the range of ways to generate income. We formulated 3 main recommendations out of those 5 results. The first is that more work should be done validating the potential contribution of NTFPs towards sustainable development in order to determine the true value of forest products to rural communities. And one example is rattan production to help conserve forests. In our theme, I think rattan production generated a lot of interest, and we all learned quite a lot through the talks and presentations regarding that. The second recommendation is the use of bamboo and sustainably grown wood products for charcoal production, and that this is a viable strategy for alleviating stress on natural tree-based resources. Lastly, forests can be used for emissions reduction programs, and this may prove an effective strategy for forest conservation practices, especially when used in conjunction with parallel strategies, such as the harvest and trade of forest products. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks to all the presenters, including yourself yesterday, for a very rich session. Can we have the last polling? Okay, 3 options here, probably all appealing, but just pick one of those, and then this will be our last polling. So let us give us a bit of time for people to vote on it. I see questions in the Q&A, which is very nice and gives me the opportunity to say warm welcome to Victor Comerel from CIMIT and the wheat research program is asking a very relevant questions about the involvement of local communities as a general recommendation, but is it really happening? Is it not happening? What do we do in research? It's obviously one of the important elements of our research, and we've been involved also in some of your initiatives, Victor, like Genovate, where this has been an important dimension. So if someone from the panel, or all the panelists, all the sessions coordinator, please go and give a reply to that question because you have the possibility to answer it. And this is also an invitation to anyone attending online to put questions in the Q&A. Okay,
Vincent, while
yes,
they type the reply to this question, we might want to start looking at the results of
exactly.
the different
if
polls.
it's ready, that would be nice.
Yes. Okay. So this poll will be closed, the current poll now. So I'll give it another 5 seconds. Make your vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's closed. So now we're going to show the results of the first poll. Please let me know if you can see them.
So here, quite a diverse batch of answers with the issue of linking global information about agroforestry species, also to link to climate change situation and challenges locally. Obviously, the two others are important as well, and there were also many more. It seems that these are only the ones that came out on top of others. Let's move to the next one. Let's see if there are some commonalities, because as has been said, the themes were all by design interdependent.
Oh,
And
sorry,
here we see
it's
also
not showing the results. I'm sorry.
58 votes here. And yeah, quality seed sizzling and seed delivery systems stands out. It's good because it was one of the focus of what we're trying to do in FTA.
Okay.
Conservation as well, number 3, but production and sustainable seed delivery systems stands out. I see team 2. You can move to the next one. Okay, that's also sums up to 100 because you couldn't pick 2, and here for the CBD, very strong plea for landscape management for the benefit of biodiversity and ecosystem services, integrated landscape management, manage and natural ecosystems, 45%. Next one, focus on integrated farming systems, that's in mountains with relative of crops and livestock, wild edibles, multi-purpose trees on farms, and value chain development. But also the importance of mountain-specific practices stood out. Theme number 5, assessing benefit of landscape restoration. Again, the landscape approach in ecological restoration to meet several needs, and the other one close by. Quite a balanced feedback. And last but not least, when we look at overall the green circular economy, and here number 1 and number 2 as well are standing out as important options. So that's a very rich feedback from all the groups. No, normally we were supposed to break at 3:45 in Kunming, Beijing time. I wonder if we can extend just a little bit, because I would like to present the set of recommendations and the process going forward, and then some further quick remarks on the context going forward. Is that okay, Yangshu, from the room? If we shorten a little bit your coffee break or tea break?
Yeah. I think we follow the planned program. So you go for recommendation.
Let's do that, and we will have a shortened.
And I hand over to you before.
We have a shortened coffee break. Okay, so I'll be quick, because in fact, most of the work a lot of the work has been done, and some of the work is still to be done with your feedback. Exactly. So Fabio, next slide. So what we've done, and really warm thanks to all the colleagues, co-theme leaders that have presented today, and to Yangshu, we've tried to wrap all the set of recommendations into some headlines with supporting text. And we came with a set of 12 main headlines. And again, what I'm presenting here will be submitted for comments with supporting text material for you. And I'll say a bit more about how you can give feedback at the end. So I'm just going to go through the headlines. Some of it is just repeating what has been said before, but that's by design. So the importance of really coming very strongly and not surprisingly to protect forests for multiple objectives: biodiversity conservation, climate change, but also sustainable food systems and production. And in doing so, number 2, the importance of supporting forest and landscape restoration. But it's not only a forest agenda here, it's also an agricultural agenda. And here stands out the importance of promoting agroecological transformations and transitions. And looking at what diversity in the fields, including with trees, but with many more species as well, can bring to landscape, to systems, to diets. Number 5, there is a need to leverage the full potential of trees on farms for agrobiodiversity, ecosystem services, resilience, and productivity, and also to meet national and global biodiversity targets, something that may resonate to the delegations in Kunming. The importance of looking and mainstreaming orphan crops into cultivation. Number 7, support innovation in knowledge, technology, and institutions for a resilient mountains futures. And we know there are very important initiatives that are going on in China, spearheaded by Jiangshu and colleagues. Next slide. Then we look at more broader contributions to broader agendas, mainstreaming biodiversity in climate change. Sometimes we just had a joint report from IPBES and IPCC. It has also been reflected here. There is a need for greater biodiversity concerning climate change, both in the discussion, in the instruments, and the implementation, both in mitigation, but also in adaptation. Then a huge variety of fruits, nuts, vegetables, mushrooms, fungi. I learned that rattan was edible, but probably Robert knows that some of the species are edible. All of this, when they're young, all of this needs to be used as a resource. And of course, there are also insects, both in food, feed, and for sustainable food systems. Number 10, understand, recognize, support, and draw lessons from indigenous culture, traditional production systems, and indigenous systems. That's the question from Victor. We hope we can address that. And the two last but not least is really, if we have to transition to a circular bioeconomy, there is a real potential of forestry and agroforestry that needs to be harnessed. And finally, looking at all of this, you need to promote instruments, but also policies, regulation that facilitate joint consideration of both landscape, governance and management, and value chains actions for sustainable management of natural resources, both acting on landscapes and on value chains at the same time. So these are the set of recommendations. There is a supporting test that hopefully, but I think we did not necessarily catch all, we tried to catch all the richness, but maybe something has not been noted. And this is why we are offering you, and we really would like all the participants to this conference, there were more than 389 participants overall, to look at the text, reflect from the sessions and your own knowledge. You will receive an email after the conference with this document. And you will also receive a template in Excel. I think it's the next slide, Fabio. Just to recognize, you will receive a PDF document and a template in Excel for you to make suggestions. You can come back perhaps to the earlier slide. And there are two modalities. Either you can send us back a feedback by email, or you can send us a feedback through a dedicated web page. You can upload your suggestions there. And we would like to give you a week to do that, to reflect and send us, so that we can enrich these recommendations, because we know as scientists, it's not enough if we exchange on good results. We need to get out of our ivory tower and really influence in the most meaningful and relevant way the process is going forward. And there is a real need for that. I hope it's clear. If there are any questions, we can also deal with that during the break. And Jiangshu, the floor is yours, and I will then take over for final wrap-up of this first segment of the plenary, final plenary.
And thanks, Vincent, and for provide presentation for our recommendation. I'd like to have very quick comment to recommendation, and it's a cultural dimension of the landscape management, or FTA, the forestry and agroforestry. So one aspect, and we need to consider is respect, recognize, reconcile the cultural diversity and the knowledge system, who are actually those indigenous people who are managing nutrient and sustain this diverse landscape. So please consider that. I think this is important. I will always give an example. Some people eat insects and some people not, and even hate. So, but it's a part of a cultural diversity. It's a part of a knowledge system. So we need to respect, recognize, and reconcile. Yeah. So really quick comments. Then come to the feedback, how to we take a recommendation forward. I think first, I see these recommendations are very rich, and it's a collective wisdom and from our participants and from team leaders, from our organizers. And first, I'd like to suggest, and we can immediately publish this a recommendation without further delay. So we're waiting feedback until end of this month. So next month we can think about to publish in different form. One form in the recommendation together with the theme recommendation, and we can also put our new journal, Circular Agricultural Systems, we can have very quick, fast editing in the submission. And also, we can also, I already discussed with Fergus Sinclair, and he like to be a guest editor for special issues, put the FTA in Circular Agriculture System, our new journal again. So any potential paper you like to publish as a research article, perspective, and or even in the policy format, and please to do so. And also we try to arrange one person to help the Fergus to facilitate the submission process for our new journal. And our media group is very active, and the first day, second day, doing very good interview with some of our participants to gain story. We already have a Chinese media covered for our FTA conference in China, and they're going to write a story about the FTA, about our participants, about our case study, and our Chinese media also have a different language channel. We have Burmese, we have Thai language, we have Lao, and also we have Vietnamese language channel, and particularly for the Mekong region. So, so the media story can be followed, and also immediately early next month, July 5th to 11th, we have a COP youth group focused on biodiversity study tool to dryland, the Hong He River Valley, to 1 week tour, and with youth. So we are well selected and very competitive, and we already received hundreds application to be compete for 25 seats, and that's is a part of a CBD process. So we like to use FTA and as framework for restoration to learning how to active with the youth group and our future leader to look at the links between land restoration and the biodiversity conservation. So our youth group, as they have a representative, would definitely go to COP and to present on results, and also during the COP, and also invited as an expert to talk on, particularly in the ecological civilization forum. That's the most, will be high-level Chinese leaders there, and will be, the forum will be permanent as a part of a legacy for CBD process based in Kunming. So that means our FTA topic can be carried onwards as part of an ecological civilization dialogue across to different culture. So, and also the third, our Mountain Future global initiative, and particular focus on circular agriculture, will be supported by Chinese Academy of Sciences as a bigger science incubation program. So we get the seeds and funding and to carry this forward for global what's called a dialogue. And so we're happy to get the endorsed letter from UNEP, from FAO, from ICIMOD, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, and also China National Gene Bank, led by Leng Wang, and he's going to for closing remark also. So that's mean particular our FTA on mountain agenda will be carried forward and through the fund from Chinese Academy of Sciences also. And finally, also before the CBD, and we're going to select 4 sites in Yunnan province, with well supported by media and also the private sector and also Yunnan provincial government to check from rice terraces landscape to the forest landscape in northwest Yunnan, to the forest conservation park, the biodiversity park, to the also the dinosaur site. So will be lot of link between landscape restoration and the biodiversity conservation. And finally, I like to say our Mountain Future facility take shape, and we already have 1,000 square meter with 18 rooms and with the office space. We're going to build our lab by end of this year, and the next year, hopefully, we're going to build 7,000 square meters, the Mountain Future facility. So allowed, and we aim for international training program endorsed by FAO and the FTA and together with the CG centers. Finally, we fairly ambitious try to build a global center for circular agriculture in Honghe, and with the support by Chinese government and also others, particularly led by CGIAR, particularly CIFOR and EQUAF. So that's a proposal from strongly endorsed by Chinese Academy of Agricultural Science. They think that China, we should also more participate into leading, say, international research on agriculture, on forestry, on restoration. So finally, and I'd like to close this and then I'll hand over to Vincent for close this session. Vincent.
Thank you, Jiangshu, and thank you to everybody online and in Kunming. I'll wrap up this first bit of the closing plenary, but please stay with us until the end, because we have 3 wonderful and very exciting keynotes to get inspired from, and that are coming up after the break. So in 2 days, we've gathered very rich and very diverse evidence demonstrating the considerable role that forest, trees, and agroforestry and all associated biodiversity in landscapes, including often overlooked mushrooms, insects, in the production of multiple ecosystem goods and services that are the heart of the implementation of multiple global agendas. And I think it's our responsibility as scientists to convey these findings and the consequence they should have on actions to policymaking and all decision makers, from farmers and the private sector to civil society and consumers. So thanks to Jiangshu for having explained to us some of the upcoming milestones regarding the CBD, regarding the Mountains Future Initiative, the idea of a forum for CBD process in Kunming, the science incubator, and so on. And in wrapping up this first segment, I'd just like to ask the question: where do we go? Where do we go from there? There are opportunities this year to raise awareness. I'll not come back to that. We're getting organized, and the recommendations of the conference will be a kind of a collective tool for this. And then, importantly, in 2021, in FTA, with here the institutions in the logos behind me, we're wrapping up a decade of research, a part of the CGIAR research program on forestry and agroforestry. And we're looking at this very juncture on a new partnership going forward. And here we have two questions. What can science and research about forestry and agroforestry do about the solutions, and how to do it and how to work together? And these two questions kind of drive the way we're now thinking FTA for a new decade, both in terms of the role of research and how and with whom to partner. And this is why this conference in Kunming and online was so important. We've still learned that there is a lot that we know, but there's also a lot that we need to further develop, to bring to awareness, to translate into commitments and action for transformational change. So it kind of expands the role of research and science to action, implementation, and transformation, doing that with institutions, but as you just said, Jiangxu, with citizens, with young people, etc. Then there's still a lot we do not know and that we need to discover. And as much as there is a decade towards 2030 on action, there also needs to be a decade on research. And research spanning over a more complex set of objectives and a fuller spectrum of the theory of change. It was wonderful to learn, in fact, how many things are still unknown when we look at fungi, mushrooms, etc., and how much we can do to discover just more. We need to consider not only what are the technical innovations in landscapes and value chains, but also the institutional innovations, governance, policy environment. And then we need good learning mechanism, long-term monitoring science, as you said, Jiangxu, and long-term initiative for this. And then, importantly, we need partnerships. We cannot do these partnerships. This is really a key message from this conference without a strong spine with China. China is a leader of global research. And as this conference has shown, it's a platform from knowledge generation. It's an incubator of institutional innovations such as the Mountain Future site, and worldwide recognized as a leader of such partnership for development. When we look at South-South investments, when we look at the Belt and Roads Initiative, when we look at FAO's hand-in-hand initiative that has been spearheaded by FAO DG Ku Dongyu, etc. So there is no way from the perspective of the current set of partners in FTA that we can build the next decade of research for development around forestry and agroforestry without a strong, effective, and genuine tie with China. And this is why we have initiated a conversation with the Chinese Academy on Science, the Chinese Academy on Forestry, the Chinese Academy on Agricultural Science, who all opened this conference. We started that last year at our FTA Decadal Science Conference. And I think there are two avenues we can work together to reinforce these partnerships. First, there is a lot we can do and more we can do in terms of collaboration with Chinese academies, universities, centers, platforms, to learn from the richness of Chinese experiments and develop further research together on key topics where China is often at the forefront of innovation, like circular agriculture, like the green economy. And second, there are the South-South partnerships that are the essence of the CGIAR and the CGIAR programs like FTA, and it's a priority for China as well, as we know. And as we've seen in this global conference on many topics, tree value chains, landscape, there is much to do to upscale, but also to outscale innovations that can be developed in one context, in one continent, but useful also in another context and continent. And there's a lot of program that like FTA can do with its global research for development partners, can do with China, with the technical and the organizational and scientific support and development support from China. So at the time of constructing a partnership going forward, just to close these final remarks, we hope that this conference, the results and the recommendation can really pave the way for a substantial partnership with Chinese institutions and our partners. At this conference, I would really want to thank warmly the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the richness of our collaboration with the Kunming Institute of Botany in particular. So these were my words. I'm hoping to you we spend a little bit more time. I apologize for the shortened tea or coffee break. Over to the room.
The relationship between humans and nature has evolved through 3 ages and 3 spaces. In the age of nature, humans saw themselves as being part of the natural world. Humans developed agriculture and lived in rural areas in close connection with the land. In the age of industry, or the Anthropocene, humans raised great cities which relied on intensive agriculture in the lowlands and coastal regions. We are now moving into a new, uncertain age. It will be shaped by powerful new technologies such as artificial intelligence. But how these will affect the relationship between humans and nature has yet to be determined. We must look beyond the urban-rural divide to a third space for inspiration, one whose diversity and richness has been largely forgotten, the mountainscape. Mountains cover almost a quarter of the Earth's surface. Both urban and rural areas depend on mountains for essential ecosystem services such as fresh water, crops, and high-value products. Mountainscapes are storehouses of natural and cultural diversity. They are on the front lines of global change and can provide insights and solutions to global problems. Mountains offer an escape from the uniformity and monocultures of modern life in the form of an alternative model of development, one that draws on the ingenuity and traditional knowledge of mountain peoples. This means taking proper account of ecological and cultural value, combining ancient wisdom with modern science, building equitable and just governance systems, and respecting the rights and intellectual property of mountain peoples. We need to unlock the potential of mountains as pathways to a better future. But doing this will need support. It requires a mechanism that can co-develop innovative solutions, a new way to secure a prosperous and sustainable future for mountains and their people. This is Mountain Futures. Mountain Futures is an international platform for collaboration based in Honghe, China. Together with our network of partners, we are co-developing business models that use new technologies to benefit farming communities while generating sustainable profits and protecting the environment. With the Bali Para Foundation, we hold international conferences that showcase the most exciting ideas in mountain and rural development, training a new generation of mountain leaders. We're helping mountain peoples voice their aspirations through citizen science and filmmaking. And we are developing new protocols to ensure that indigenous people benefit from their intellectual property. In mountain regions around the world, a brighter future is being built. Welcome to Mountain Futures.